for the second half of our concert, I wanted to talk about Mahler's First Symphony. In the next 18 months, we play all of Mahler's big symphonic works, and what a journey it is. What is extraordinary is that the First Symphony started in 1884 when he was still only 24. Shows no sign of lack of confidence or youthful inexperience. Of course, it comes up as fresh as anything, but the sheer brilliance of such an unusual symphonic scheme is still breathtaking. Mahler really thought, when this symphony was first performed, that it was going to be easy for people to understand. Of course, now it's one of his most popular masterpieces. But the first performances were almost unmitigated disasters. In Budapest, even his friends would not talk to him after the first performance. They were so embarrassed. In Vienna in 1900, the orchestra actually deserted him and left him on stage to face the boos and the catcalling and the whistling through house keys. Big old house keys they had in Vienna. It was one of their trademarks. And he said afterwards, I was so shocked because I thought everybody would understand this piece and I would be able to live off the earnings of the multiple performances over the next years. How wrong he was. Now, what did people find so strange? It is, after all, a symphony in 4 movements, a rather larger symphony than most were written around it, with a kind of normal scheme, a first movement, a scherzo, a slow movement, and a big finale. But being Mahler, it's what he put into it which seems to have confused people. By all accounts, Mahler was an extraordinary kaleidoscope of emotions and feelings at every moment, and he could go from being like a little child to being a fury to crying to laughing uproariously, all really within seconds. And the music does the same thing. There's very little music which is as autobiographical as Mahler. And in a way, when you learn about his life, it seems almost beside the point because there is so much of him deeply embedded in the music. The thing, of course, that caused the real scandal was the third movement, which is a kind of funeral march. But it's a deeply ironic march. It's a parody of a funeral march. And simply nothing like it had ever been heard. Although people have been using folk music for centuries beforehand, nobody had used the type of music, the type of Jewish klezmer music, the type of marching band music, and jammed all these things together quite the same way. Similarly, nobody had ever used something like Frère Jacques, the symphony, before. It's as if we use jingle bells nowadays from my culture, for instance. The idea of the third movement is that the hero of the symphony, if the hero of the symphony is Mahler himself, has died because of his love affair, because of his love. And he is being processed along, but carried by all the animals of the forest. There were a very famous series of woodcuts called the Huntsman's Funeral, which are just as ironic as the music. And all the animals have the huntsman tied up on a big log, as he would as if he had killed a bear, and they are slowly processing with him towards his grave. And so the sound of the thud of a timpani, of a double bass playing Frere Jacques in a sad key, in a tuba playing the thing, in little marching sounds coming from the distance. And then the first interruption by very, very Semitic klezmer music, swooning oboes, vibrating trumpets, interrupted by simply another marching band coming from the distance. Again interrupted in its turn in a memory of what his love was. There was nothing like this. Nobody was prepared for it, and it should still be a shock today. To go backwards, the first movement begins in some kind of dawn, one of the quietest sounds that a whole orchestra can make, an A in 6 octaves of the orchestra. And once again, as in the Beethoven, you can hear the instruments searching 2 notes at a time, searching where the music is going to go. But in this being Mahler, you also hear in the distance little fanfares, first of all in clarinets, then in trumpets from a distance. And there's a sense that I know from very few other pieces of really waking up, of coming into consciousness, as though you're hearing the last fragments of a dream. The whole movement is again imbued with this feeling of love and nature. He used part of his own early song-cycle, which talked about love and walking in the woods, walking in the forest. Again, in the middle of the movement, there is another one of these passages where time simply stands still, and you have a heat haze, just simply the sounds of a cuckoo hop, 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 against it. Some of the most magical sounds Mahler ever in his long composing career created. The second movement finds us again deep in the country and deep really in the peasant culture of the country. And the music stamps and whirls as though one has a drunken dance, a kind of Bruegel festival. But also it moves wilder and wilder, so you don't know where it's going to go. The second part of it, the trio, is again something more like a waltz, very gentle, very tender, very, very sweet. But again, with Mahler, so sweet that you don't know really whether he means this as irony or whether it's real. And it must have been extremely uncomfortable for the audiences in the time to listen to. The third movement we've talked about, completely brilliant, original, ironic funeral march. Mahler originally had a program for this symphony, which he suppressed because he felt it actually led people only to see simple pictures. But the last movement was titled From the Inferno to Paradiso, and that's a good description. It is as though the hero, the artist, Mahler himself, is rebelling against the idea of death, and that he believes through love he will really be able to be reborn and come through in victory, which is exactly what happens in this movement. Only in Beethoven's Ninth Symphony had there been a finale on this type of scale with this many different moods, from the darkest, most tragic, despairing music to music of idealized love. There's nothing quite like it. And it really gives you an idea of what Mahler in his middle 20s must have been like. Sometimes it's really like a volcano going off. And at the end, there is a type of victory, of an exuberance of which he was hardly ever able to be captured in his life. A wonderful moment where he asks the horns playing their fanfare, please stand up, which the horn section of the Philharmonica does with enormous joy. Again, a kind of stage management which shows what a man of theatre he was. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have enjoyed the performance of Beethoven and that you will have equal joy in the performance of Mahler's Fourth